Are watching New Day, your morning window to stories that are making headlines all over the world, Africa, and globally, the world at large. Good morning, our viewers. I'm Rita Bakonse, together with Dr. Sem Oluchowski, our resident analyst, to bring you the detailed discussions and as well as analytical views of the stories and headlines. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Joe.
And in our headlines today, we are going to start with the East African Community. The East African Community had their 25th Ordinary Summit over the weekend on Saturday, that was 7th of March, where President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of Uganda was made the chairman. He took over the chairmanship of the East African Community Summit taking it away from President William Ruto of the Republic of Kenya. He took over towards the end of the meeting, and also the different heads of states and government also approved the appointment of Ambassador Patrick Stephen, who is from the Republic of Tanzania, as the new Secretary General of this East African Community Summit. But here today we are going to talk about President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni being the chairman, or taking over the chairmanship from Kenya's President William Ruto, taking over the chairmanship of the East African Community Summit. The East African Community is a regional bloc that has over 8 different countries or different states, with different heads of states and government as well. And in this meeting, after President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni took over the chairmanship, he thanked other different leaders, and also sent greetings. Said they had received greetings from the Ugandans. But this is a time where President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is taking over the chairmanship, where there is a lot of financial strain in the bloc, among East African communities, and insecurities. That's how we have a few member states that do have a lot of insecurities and financial strain. How do we? The major thing is what priorities do we see President Museveni going to come up with, and what concerns? What should be the things that he prioritizes during his reign? Him being the chairman, it will end in 2027, in March of 2027. That's when him being the chairman of the East African Community Summit is going to end. But what we are to discuss is what are the priorities that President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni should take on. And the speech he made is also going to be displayed right here on the screen, so that you get to hear what he said after being made chairman of the East African Community. Over to you, Doctor.
Can we have this speech?
Plunder. As the century of shame for African continent, where the whole of it had been colonized, and a half a millennium of plunder by the European and Arabs with the slave trade come to an end, become free. Africa had become free. Uhuru, freedom had come. The question was, where is Umoja? Because you remember, it was Uhuru na Umoja. Uhuru came. Now the question was, where is Umoja? Umoja for economic prosperity through economic integration, in order to create big markets to support the efforts of the African wealth creators, and Umoja for political integration, where possible, to create strategic security for the black race on land, in the air, at sea, and in space. Yes, some of the efforts for economic integration have moved. I worked with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, Mzee Mkapa to revive the East African community. You remember this community had broken up. So when we came into government, immediately we started working with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, later on Mkapa, who brought it back. I salute Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for joining the East African community. Let us fully implement the charter of this African community and the roadmap. How about COMESA and the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area? Some actors seem to treat this integration as optional. In my view, I have always held that it is mandatory to unite or risk perpetual marginalization. How about political integration? In the case of East Africa, we the Pan-Africanists have never relented. Ever since the student days in the 1960s, we have been struggling for that integration, supporting our elder Pan-Africanists, Mwalimu Nyerere, Abeid Karume, Kenneth Kaunda, Arap Moi, etc. With Mzee Kibaki, Mzee Mkapa, President Kagame, President Nkurunziza, we called for the fast tracking of the federation in the year 2014. However, on account of the awkwardness of the African Revolution, seeing what is happening in much of Africa, instead of uhuru na umoja, in many countries, in many areas, we have got uhuru na uhasama. We have a Uganda proverb, Ekitata muhima tekimumala konte. In English, it means that if a muhima, one of the tribes in Uganda, does not die, even if he loses cattle on account of his dedication to cattle keeping, he will do everything possible to get new cattle. Africa is still there, although we have lost opportunities, but we can catch up. What is the consequence of uhuru na uhasama? Uhuru na uhasama instead of uhuru na umoja. Economic stagnation and the suffering of the populations. What is generating the migration of the African youth that are dying in the Mediterranean Sea going to Europe? It is the narrowness of the money economy of Africa that does not create necessary jobs. One of the consequences of not fully integrating our markets, investors get frustrated when they cannot export within even the East African community. The GDP of Africa today, the GDP of the whole of Africa is US dollars 3.6 trillion. That of the USA is US dollars 31.82 trillion. The GDP of USA is bigger than the one of Africa more than 10 times. China is now 20.6 trillion. India is US dollars 4.18 trillion. Even little South Korea has got a GDP of US dollars 1.86 trillion. One may ask, why does the little South Korea have the that GDP size? One factor is that South Korea, because of the Cold War politics, benefited a lot from the USA market. However, in our Luganda language we say, Omugo oguli ku muliraano teggobango. The stick in the neighbor's house will not help you to scare away the leopard. You need your own stick in your own house. You have seen Mr. Trump recently threatening tariffs on South Korea and others. The question we need to ask is, does size of the domestic market matter in terms of attracting investments, domestic or foreign? The size of your market matters. Why? China opened up its economy in 1978, when many of the African countries were already under the pastoralism of the World Bank and the IMF, were already investing, implementing structural adjustment, all those things.
Yeah, that was the speech of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni over in Arusha on Saturday, that was 7th of March, over the 25th Ordinary East African Community Summit. In his speech, he talks about Africa's GDP. He said that Africa's combined GDP is relatively lower than that of the rest of our continent, and saying and he stressed out that this is majorly because Africa has a lot of fragmented markets. And in his speech, he also stressed that large internal markets are critical to economic growth and industrialization. And more to that, Doctor, I would like you to talk about what he actually has to prioritize in this 1 year that he has been given as the chairman of the East African community. What should be, because he has talked about other GDP, and then there is a time where he has talked about the different member states, that is South Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan as well, and we know they are facing a lot of conflicts and instabilities. So he has gotten leadership at a point of a lot of economic strain, and then we have a lot of insecurities. What should he actually prioritize? What strategies should he make to have a nice role?
It's congratulations to the president for taking over the chairmanship of the East African community for the 4th time, 4th or 5th. Yeah, I think he's taking it over for the 4th time, and I shouldn't leave that chairmanship. And probably you need to amend something there to make his chairmanship last for around 5 years, because the ordinary kind of chairmanship that we've been having, the East African community, like you said prior, it runs for only 1 year. Now, 1 year doesn't do anything in a population, in leadership, most especially in a population that doesn't have structures. First of all, just establishment of structures at different angles. Establishment of a structure that can be in a position to hold and take the East African community to some other level. You need around 5 years. You don't give this kind of chairmanship to each and every person, most especially if you really want this organization to move forward. So I think what they need to do, first of all, is they need to change something to make sure that the chairmanship is held for quite some time, because 1 year, for real, without proper structures and things that are supposed to be handled the way they're supposed to be handled, you can't really have it successfully. I mean, you can't do anything in a year, most especially when the membership countries, when the membership of different countries is also very questionable. You've just talked about the new members. You have a country like Burundi, or Burundi was here. You have Congo, you have South Sudan, you have, Somalia. Most of these countries are very, very, very unstable in various angles. So what do you do? So it's a very, very big challenge, and we're so much happy that the president has been in a position to take over the East African community. First of all, he is the godfather of the East African community. He's the godfather. All the creation, the revival of the East African community is his mind. He was in position to deal with the people that he has been in position to mention, the Benjamin Mkapa, and then eventually you have Daniel Arap Moi in Kenya, and then eventually Paul Kagame also joins in there. So it's the godfather. It's the most experienced leader that you can ever have right now on the within the East African region. So he needs to be in a position to set pace. So that's why he's trying to lecture them. He's trying to let them know that this is what we're trying to do. This is where we're trying to go. So you see new leadership like Chekedi, new leadership of people like Salva Kiir. They can't even manage their own countries. They can't even manage their own countries. So why are you giving them leadership of the African community, which has almost 300 million people? So they can't do it. So it's a little bit very fine for the president to come back, but he has a very, very, very serious challenge. Number one, he's the most experienced, like we've said, is the godfather of the African community. And if you look at the 52 million people in Kenya, the 58 million people from Tanzania, and then you have the 45 million people in Uganda, the 12 million people in Rwanda, and the 13 million people in Burundi, and then you have the 11 million people from South Sudan. You almost have a population of around 300 million people, and it's going to handle that. So Chekedi can't do it. Salva Kiir can't do it, most especially when they've also been failures in their own economies, in their own countries. So you need an experienced leader, and so far the president is the only person that can be in a position to have it promoted. So his biggest priority should be about making people understand what the East African region stands for. And he has to make sure that everyone gets it, everyone understands it the way they are supposed to get it understood. That is his big challenge. How do you get the Samia Suluhu get it? How do you get someone like Paul Kagame understand it? Because at the end of the day, yes, we have the East African community, but we talked about this some time back, that it is the biggest community that has been fought because you have the Russians coming in, you have the Chinese coming in, and those are the new official entrants. So they've been here for some time. So you have new entrants. Don't forget that the British are interested in this community. The Americans are interested in this community. So how do you move forward? You know, so his biggest challenge that he's going to face as a president, but of course I know he can be in a position to handle that, is to make young leaders, not young in age, but young in leadership, to ensure that they really, really understand the kind of community and to understand the kind of vision. And then number two is to move it to the people, because yes, they are the leaders of the community, but they are members of the community. Membership is provided by the people. Do people in the East African community understand the value of the East African community? Do they really, really even understand this? Do they know the importances and the benefits of us being in a community? Do they have it on ground? You know, you would be thinking about some other approaches, maybe of letting the people on ground know. Because yes, Uganda, we've had our borders open, we've had people from different East African countries come here, you know, and they can buy land, they can do whatever they have to do. But do they understand it at the East African level perspective? Or they just trade with them because they have the money? So it's very, very important. They should be looking at some of the ways that that they can be in position to make people understand the value of the community. How do you do it? Give some money to musicians, give some money to Diamond, give some money to Jose Chameleon, because these musicians have been in position to win some kind of following at East African level, such that even the people within the community can be in a position to understand the intention and the benefits of the community. So the biggest challenge is the presence is of age, and that's a very big disadvantage, by the way. It's a very big disadvantage to the community. Are you going to leave it in the hands of Ruto? Ruto is a politician and Ruto is a businessman. So he doesn't look at that umoja. He doesn't understand the mashariki, that kind of, you know, depth. We used to think that probably maybe Paul Kagame would be somehow a better kind of alternative, but we've also seen him a little bit of being more of a Western kind of broker in most cases. So the only person that is qualified, because he's the godfather and he has that kind of, he's in position to see the big picture, is the president. So that's why Mawari is, now he's of age, and the leadership is only for 1 year. You can't do anything in just 1 year. I'm of the view that if they can probably extend the term and then it runs like for at least 3, because at least for 3 years you've been in position to influence the kind of structures. And 2, each and every new leader that comes from the East African community, or each and every new country that elects leadership, everything changes. Kenya is voting next year. You know, so definitely, the way Kenyatta was handling the East African community is not the way Ruto is handling. You know, Samia Suluhu have just come back. You know, who else is going to come? Are they going to be in a position to understand that? So for that to be done, such that everyone can have the community at heart, you need a leader, you need someone that's going to be in a position to champion the movement. And apparently, is the president, and as we speak, is the most qualified person to chair the community.
Oh yeah, that is the president. But we have more key milestones that were able to be reached or marked during this East African Community Summit that happened over in ISREAL, that happened on Saturday, where there were different judges. That the meeting witnessed the swearing-in of judges that were appointed by the summit, and these judges are going to be working in the Court of Justice for East Africa. And also the launch of the 7th East African Development Strategy was made from the year 2026/2027 to the year 2030-2031, and also the launch of the East African Customs Bond aimed at facilitating trade across the region. We talked about this customs bond. It is meant to help other traders and the people who who clear in items to have a different. You know, they've been having very many customs bonds or to pay to. Now they want them to have one particular customs bond for all of East African countries. So this was also made during this East African Summit. And the summit also recognized regional youth excellence through awarding the winners of the 2024 East African Community Essay Writing Competition. And it concluded with the presentation of the official summit communique by the East African Secretary General, outlining key resolutions and decisions that were adopted by the heads of states. and yeah, and those are some of the key achievements, key remarks that happened during this summit. And then we see the President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni being made the new chairman, and just like Dr. said, the impact can't be that big in just a period of 1 year. He believes that for him to actually bring the impact, or to bring the East African community where it's supposed to be at, it needs to be extended to quite a period of 5 years, which I don't know about that, but which it does looks like it's something that, because of course in a period of 1 year, you can at least bring strategies, you can bring policies, but then achieving them, you would not be able to watch them get achieved. Maybe if you let them stay, and then maybe the person who takes on power helps reach to the full goal, or to the capacity of what your goal was. But that's what we had over the weekend in Arusha, in Tanzania, on Saturday. We'll be heading for a short commercial break and return with more stories and segments. bring you segments. We are back with we are going to be talking right now. We are moving on to the clashes that happened over in South Sudan over the past week. That was on the days of Wednesday and Thursday. In these clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces, we saw over 51 people were killed in this clash that happened over the southern part of South Sudan. That was in Kordofan. And Kordofan has turned out to be currently it's one of the most fierce battlefields in the war raging between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. And in this conflict where they killed over 51 people, the army, that is the Sudanese armed forces, the army said they were able to recapture the city or the town of Bara, and this town is on the way on the road to Khartoum. And we see that during this recapture is what led to this kind of massive killing between these two military groups, that is the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces. And then the South Kordofan city, of course, these people were killed in this Sudanese South Kordofan region. This South Kordofan region was rocked throughout the day and by Thursday. And so this conflict happened between Wednesday and Thursday. So that's when we had these massive killings happen. And then the recapture of this town of Bara. But then, Doctor, was this kind of was this kind of conflict worth it? Because the army was really, for them, they found this kind of conflict, this clash, they found it productive since they were able to regain or recapture one of the towns they had lost, that is the town of Bara, which is on the road to Khartoum. So was this kind of worth it? Was the recapture of Bara really, is it going to really actually help them in trying to, to stabilize or trying to fight the paramilitary rapid support forces in South Sudan?
Yeah, Kordofan is one of the biggest areas that you can be in position to talk about because it's even divided into three. You have the northern Kordofan, eastern, and then the western. It's a very big, region. But the most threatening or scaring part is that this war has turned out to be the Ukrainian war. Because when you mention that the rapid support forces were in a position to start using drones, now this war is no longer, it's out beyond the description of a civil war. It's a very, very serious conflict because why would someone be in position to use drones? Now, that's what you've been in position to see Russia and Ukraine using for some time. It's what America and Iran have been using, but they've not used it in a conflict that is very internal, because we are talking about a conflict that is within the boundaries of Sudan. And if the Rapid Support Forces, General Dagalo, is using now drones, oh my God, that's getting a little bit very worse, most especially when it comes to getting civilian casualties. That's why you can be in position to register 51 deaths of people, and definitely that number could have been bigger than that, because what do drones do? Drones carry weapons and they can drop them anywhere. Now, this also shows that maybe the interests of bigger powers are coming in, because we all know Sudan doesn't manufacture drones. Where do they get from? Where do they get them from? Probably someone is facilitating that program such that they can be in position to get the drones. Yes, we're in a position to have last week, but we're in a position to host General Dagalo. He was hosted by the president of Uganda here, as one of the responsibilities that were given to him by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. General Dagalo was in a position to come over here, and the representative of General Burhan as well. He was in position to come around a week before, the coming in of General Dagalo. We thought that maybe the conflict is trying to take shape and maybe trying to show signs of, ceasing, and maybe giving a chance to people in Sudan to be in a position to enjoy their own lives again normally. But of course, now if you go into drone fighting, now that makes it a little bit worse. So that means the funders of the conflict are so much interested in having this conflict go on for quite some time, and definitely civilian death, just collateral damage. Because if you're telling me that the Rapid Support Forces can be in a position to drive and direct drones into specific regions where they want to get dominated and maybe hit the Sudanese armed forces, then that conflict is way, way beyond. We should just pray. We should just be praying for those people, because it's now turning out to be, You know, when countries are fighting, you happen to look what are the interests of the different fighters, because wars have different objectives. Why are the Rapid Support Forces fighting? Why are the Sudanese Armed Forces fighting? And two, who is the funder? In other words, who is the beneficiary from this? We're in a position to talk about how gold has turned out to be a big on market. One of the countries that have been allegedly, you know, incriminated, I mean, involved in this trade is Uganda and Kenya. We've seen the UAE coming in. We've seen Russia coming in. We've talked about the Horn of Africa as well, you know, getting involved in there. It's a lot of politics that's happening right there. But the biggest challenge is about now who funds who. Now, if a conflict stands to that level, and then you're talking about having drones being used internally between a civilian force or a paramilitary group and then a government group or a legal military organization, then that is turning out to be a little bit weird, because we all know what drones have been in position to do in Ukraine. If it wasn't for the capability or for the drone capability that Ukraine has been in position to have, it would be very hard for Zelensky to still be the leader in the leadership of Ukraine. But because of the capability of having the drones, and now that drones are coming in as new forms of ammunition that are being used on the front line, and then you're killing civilians, that conflict is getting worse.
So, Doctor, you've mentioned the fact that we had General Dagalo hosted in Uganda. Guess State House, I believe he was hosted, I think, a few weeks back in Uganda. And then what the point where the major reason as to why he was hosted, the president was talking about having a peaceful talks, you know, with the counterpart, saying that the talks or continuous dialogues is what is going to actually bring on peace in Sudan. It's what is going to restore Sudan back to stability. But then we are saying the same person who showed the willingness of wanting, you know, of the dialogue, of having dialogues and having peace talks, is the same person bombing and sending drones. And then the fact that they're actually killing different civilians, they are destroying infrastructure and homes of that civilians in South Sudan, majorly in Kordofan, which is now believed to be a very fierce battlefield for these two military groups. What was the main aim? So do we find the meeting that was had with the president here in Uganda, do we find it useless? Or how was the impact that the Rapid Support Forces actually had to fight back? Because these were clashes between these two. Because even the army, the Sudanese armed forces, fought, because they also fought and they were able to regain that particular city or town of Bara, the one they've been talking about, the one they recaptured from the Rapid Support Forces. So do we really see them actually wanting that peace? Now, what is the major point of General Dagalo? What is behind, what is his goal in this?
He wants to lead. And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, that it's going to be very hard for Sudan to keep together. It's going to be very hard. We might see another part of Sudan going away, because that's the goal. Because at the end of the day, you don't see Dagalo seizing and you don't see Burhan coming down. Such conflicts are so much predetermined by the interests of the funders. We all know Dagalo doesn't have that capability, and Burhan doesn't have that capability as well. So Egypt, some countries like Russia are pro so much to, I mean, they so much support the regime of, the side of the Sudanese armed forces. And then allegedly we've had the UAE and, you know, a lot of other Qatar coming in to give support to General Dagalo. You've talked about General Dagalo's coming here, you know, whether it was fruitful in a way of ensuring that there is pacification within Sudan. Yes, at the end of the day, you don't see ceasefire just like that. It's diplomacy doesn't just, you don't act out in the blue. Let's just talk about, let's just borrow something from Iran. Iran and America were having talks. They were having talks before America and Israel chose to attack, you know, to violate the talks that they were in position to have. We've so many times seen that Ukraine and Russia have been so much in talks, but Russia doesn't stop bombing, just like Ukraine. So when you're talking about some kind of ammunitions, coming some kind of diplomacy, it's a step by step. You don't just give up something that you've been fighting for because someone has called you. Because at the end of the day, that might be a trick that they may use to take you on. So we're in a position that if the president was in a position to bring Dagalo here and the deputy of General Burhan, we can do better than that. Like we emphasized last time, is acting out of the responsibility that was given to him by the African Union. That is as per the Peace and Security Committee that was established, of which is the chairperson. So yes, General Dagalo might have been in position to come. We may not have been in position to get all the all the discussions and the details, but we believe that if the president was in position to have him here, he can be in position to have him again. Actually, that was the third time, because the first time he came in 2023, he met the president in Rakitula. This was his second time. That is officially, meaning that there are some times that they've been in position to meet unofficial as well. So it's a little bit hard for you to come up with a formal conclusion that the talks that they had with the president were a little bit fruitless. We might be looking at something, but the usage of drones now, that changes the scale of the war, and the impacts of the war are turning out to be far-reaching.
Yeah, that is what we had. That's what we had all over in South Sudan. That was the past week. These clashes happened over on Wednesday as well as Thursday, where we had over 51 people being killed between the clashes, or coming from these clashes of the Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese Armed Forces. This happened in the southern region of South Sudan, which is the Kordofan region, and this has left many people at the bridge of starvation in Kordofan region. And since this war started between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces, a lot of people have been displaced. It has killed tens of thousands of people in South Sudan, and also left over 11 million people displaced, according to the United Nations reports. But away from what happened, away from the killings, that is really sad what happened in South Sudan. But away from these killings, we'll be having to head over into our health tips. they've been able to, you know, come about with it.
Yeah, but it's one of the most deadly diseases that has, you know, for centuries affected lives, most especially on the African continent. Yeah, people are not okay. It's one of the diseases that you don't expect to have a cure for in just recent times. Yeah, so many, actually, it's a little bit now, people are a little bit surviving because of, but back in the days it was very specific that if someone has been born with, you know, sickle cells, they don't go past a age bracket.
Yeah,
it was a little bit, you know.
20,
yeah, I didn't want to mention that because, you know,
but now they actually pass it.
No,
you know?
Someone might be 19 and you're saying they don't survive 20.
No, people actually now surpass that age. People are now like 30 with sickle cells.
Yeah, it's because of the treatment and the medication, you know, that is really coming. But it's hard. It's very hard, most especially when something affects you at cellular level. Then, because we've not had a lot of chances and a lot of science that has been in position to study human beings at cellular level. Yes, we've studied organs, we've studied it, you know, we've studied organs, we've studied systems, but scientific studies at cellular level are very, very expensive and they are very rare. So since it's a cellular level and it can be carried forward to an offspring, that makes it a very, very different, a very hard condition that is affecting humanity.
Yeah, the fact that it's genetic. I think that's why partners, you know, before having kids, you're supposed to actually check. Because if you're a carrier of the sickle cell and, you know, the wife is also a carrier, you're obviously going to you're going to be selfish to the child. The child is going to be fully having the sickle cell disease. So that's why that testing is actually very vital. Though, do Africans actually take that kind of test?
I think there are so many things that we need to consider before even marrying someone, before even getting into that. You know, there's some bit of, I don't know if you heard about it, it's called genetic counseling. Now, genetic counseling is very expensive. I only know one person who does it in Uganda. It's, yes, you've appreciated someone, okay, maybe Muchala Nyiramugisha looks right, and then we need to have kids. So someone does genetic counseling, like they profile you at gene level. They profile you, like they study your genes before you get in any kind of entanglement. So after studying your genes, they're like, there are genes that are not compatible here, and we wouldn't like them being carried forward. So it's a little bit of an expensive kind of engagement scientifically. It's very, very expensive. So there are so many things that we need to look for. Actually, most of the disorders that are still affecting us mentally and all that at infancy, most of these they are avoidable if we get into the relationship a little bit more serious and you take it more serious, and then you have a little bit of profiling. So, but people take someone because they go to them at church. People take someone because they go to them in a tribal meeting. Those are some of the parameters that we have. But I think in this century we should be in position to take it beyond that. You don't appreciate someone just like that, because at the end of the day, if you choose to have someone and then you choose to have kids with them, that's one of the biggest problems that cannot be dealt with. Most especially if you brought a child, if you brought a life on this planet, it's our responsibility to ensure that you bring a better life than, you know.
Yeah, that is it. We had the sickle cell disease for you in our health tips, and yes, it's a disease that actually people do live with, and we have to do with the stigmatization that used to be there back then, where, you know, the people with sickle cell disease used to be stigmatized in the job world. You know, they never used to actually get jobs, because people feel like these are very risky people to work with. But no, we can actually live with these people. You can live with sickle cell beyond the time frame that was actually given back then, because people have survived with it up to the age of 40, 50. Yeah.
If you're a boss, can you hire someone with sickle cells?
I would, because of course I am preaching against the stigmatization. So I would definitely hire them. Yes, we had the sickle cell disease for you, and we've talked about.
A boss is a capitalist. All what they want is the money.
Not me. You care about,
You're a good
one
person.
another.
You're
so
a good person.
So that is it that we had for you. We'll be heading for a short commercial break and return with a sports segment.